Hi there and welcome to another quick tutoring video from me, the History Tutor, and in this one we're going to be looking at the AQA topic of Elizabethan England. We're going to be looking at why Elizabeth didn't get married, and we're going to be developing our interpretation skills. So in this video we're going to be looking at the Elizabeth's problem with marriage and then assessing an interpretation to decide how convincing it is. That means that we're going to be looking at question 3 in the AQA exam, and we're going to work out the view of an historian about Elizabeth's problem with marriage and use our knowledge to assess just how convincing is it. So we'll need to revise your knowledge first of all. So find the pages on marriage in your revision guide, and also the relevant consequences, like maybe rebellion could be a consequence of not marrying, and revise your knowledge. And then come back here and we'll have a quick quiz. Okay, so here is our quiz. So 7 questions about Elizabeth's problem of marriage. So have a look through those questions in the revision guide and see if you can fill in the answers. So pause me now and give it a go. Okay, so here are the answers then. So why was Cecil most concerned about marriage? And obviously, marriage is really important as a problem because it's about succession. So Elizabeth without children means that her reign lacks authority, and people could lead rebellions to overthrow her. So this links us obviously to Mary Queen of Scots. So Catholics felt that Mary Queen of Scots was the rightful ruler of the country, and she really was the only heir to the throne because she was Tudor and also a queen. So Catholics could try and overthrow Elizabeth and bring in Mary to be queen if Elizabeth did not sort out her succession. Question 2. Which English noble was considered for Elizabeth to marry? So we've got Robert Dudley, and the rumours were that they were sort of childhood friends and were in love as well, but Dudley was already married, but his wife then died mysteriously. And the Dudley family had also a history of being traitors to Mary, Queen Mary that is. That might have been a good thing in Protestant England because Mary was a Catholic, but still the family had a reputation of being traitors. Leicester, or Dudley as he's known, was not necessarily a great candidate to marry, although he did propose to Elizabeth eventually with his spectacular events at Kenilworth Castle, but Elizabeth rejected him. Then the French person, and older Elizabeth did consider marrying, and now that's Francis, Duke of Anjou, and she considered marrying him for an alliance with France. It was not about having babies or a marriage for love, it was a political marriage because England was at war with Spain in the 1570s and beyond, and they needed France for help in their war against Spain. But there was a problem. Anjou was Catholic, and there had been Catholic wars of religion against the Protestants in France, and there had just been an event called the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, where lots of Catholics went around killing Protestants. Uproar in England took place, and Protestant England would not allow Elizabeth to marry a Catholic. Question 4. Give one reason why Elizabeth could not marry Robert Dudley. Well, it was rumoured that his wife might have died mysteriously by falling down the stairs, and maybe that Dudley, or Leicester as he's known, was involved. Also, many of the other lords were being jealous, so Leicester was in the Privy Council and had been risen up by the Queen already, and to marry him might have caused more problems. Question number 5. Why could she not marry Philip of Spain? So this is obviously from earlier on in her reign, maybe a little bit before the course, but it's worth being aware of so you can understand why a little bit of angst and problems emerges between Philip and Elizabeth. So firstly, Philip was Catholic, of course, and so Elizabeth felt she couldn't marry a Catholic. Also, Philip would want to be super powerful and take over running the country perhaps, so Elizabeth didn't want to share her power. Who broke the parliamentary ban on discussing Elizabeth's marriage? So Peter Wentworth is the answer, and this suggests an idea of problems developing with Parliament. So Parliament were getting very worried. They're quite religious Parliament. There are a lot of Puritans and Protestants in there. They're worried about the country becoming more Catholic, or Mary Queen of Scots taking over. They were desperate for Elizabeth to get married quickly. So they started discussing it, and Elizabeth had to ban them from talking about marriage. That is her prerogative to talk about marriage. It's not the rule of Parliament to talk about marriage. So she shut down Parliament and banned them talking about it. Peter Wentworth, they started talking about it again, and Parliament ordered him to be sent to the Tower. In 1566, people became more concerned about Elizabeth getting married. Why? Well, she caught smallpox, and there was fear of her dying without an heir organised and no succession because she wasn't married, didn't have children. So this is why Parliament then became worried and started talking about the issues of getting married because they feared a Catholic Protestant civil war over the succession. Okay, so here is our question. It says, how convincing is interpretation A about the reasons why Elizabeth did not marry? Explain why using the interpretation and your own knowledge. And as we can see, there is the interpretation there. And what we need to do is read through and work out the key messages from it. We then will assess it with our knowledge. Okay, so the success criteria for this question is relatively simple. You pick out 2 messages, and each message is a paragraph and you explain with your knowledge whether you think it's correct or not. So let's actually do this exercise now, shall we? So have a read through and see if you can work out 2 clear messages about reasons why Elizabeth did not get married. Pause me now and give it a go. Okay, so here are the messages I've thought of. Maybe you've annotated different ones in your revision guide. Here's what I've said though. So there were no good matches that would maintain religious peace as well as political security, according to this. And there were no good matches at home, as marriages to the nobles would cause problems for Elizabeth in court. So there seems to be 2 obvious ideas. Now what we need to do is think about knowledge. So annotate around these views in your revision guide now. Can you think of any knowledge that supports these ideas are convincing or not convincing? So list your knowledge around this now. Okay, so here is what I've gone for. So knowledge that it is convincing from the first view. There were no good matches that would maintain religious peace. So yes, Philip and Duke of Anjou were the only strong matches for security, but they were Catholic, would cause problems like ruin Elizabeth's middle way. Her religious policy might cause further wars. Obviously, the French wars of religion were a problem. So there were some real problems there. And so, yes, it's relatively convincing. Also, there were no good matches at home, as marriages to a noble could cause problems in Elizabeth's court. She could not marry Dudley as he was too controversial. Mysterious death of his wife. He was a Protestant and his father was a traitor to Mary. Okay, so how do we write this then? So we want to still write in a appeal paragraph. So we want to say something like, the interpretation is partly or very convincing about the reasons why Elizabeth did not marry because. So we want to set up our view. We probably think it's very convincing because we didn't have any knowledge saying it wasn't convincing, although you may have come up with your own. So we're probably going to say very convincing and then give a reason why. Very convincing because, yes, there were problems with foreign people trying to marry her and they weren't right for her. Okay, then we get some evidence. We might summarize a sentence in the interpretation or give a short quote. Then we're going to say this is convincing because and use our knowledge to support it. We've already listed our knowledge we could use, so we're going to use that to explain our ideas. If we can do a furthermore that is convincing with the second bit of knowledge, we can go for it to explain. If we think it's only partly convincing, we might do a however and give some knowledge to disagree. So that's how we're going to set up our answer. So let's give this a go now. Let's try the first viewpoint. There were no good matches that would maintain religious peace as well as political security. Let's set up our idea then. So you can see the open sentence there. The interpretation is partly or very convincing about Elizabeth's decision not to marry because. So set up your argument now. What do you think? Pause me and away you go. Okay, so I've said the interpretation is very convincing about Elizabeth's decision not to marry because Elizabeth did struggle to marry due to religious problems. Okay, so now we need some evidence. So pick out some evidence from the extract, maybe a simple little quote or short sentence, or summarize what it says in your own words. So, for example, it states, give your idea. Okay, so I've said, for example, it states she could not get a good political match due to religious differences. Okay, now we need to explain why this is convincing. So this is convincing because, now talk about some examples. We've got Philip and Anjou there. We've got ruining the middle way. We've got some ideas in there. So explain now with some knowledge. Okay, so what I've said is this is convincing because Philip of Spain and the French Duke of Anjou would have created powerful political alliances, but she could not marry them as they were Catholic. In particular, during the match to Anjou, the French were killing Protestants due to the French wars of religion and St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. This event led to increased Protestant fear and hatred towards the French. Okay, so let's try furthermore. We haven't explained how maybe this impacted Elizabeth's middle way and might ruin her religious policy. So we could go to even further into this explanation now. Try furthermore and see if you can explain another reason why she couldn't marry because of religion. Okay, so furthermore, it is convincing as marrying a Catholic would ruin her religious middle way. Elizabeth was trying to create religious peace in the country. A Catholic king would clearly interfere with religious policy, and this would cause a split in the English nobles and perhaps future civil war. So some significant ideas. So let's have a go now at the second paragraph. So I'm not going to talk you through piece by piece. You can pause me now and give a go at writing the final paragraph, and you can see the writing frame there and the ideas we had. So there's no good matches at home because it could split the court. See if you can argue ways you agree with that. Away you go. Okay, so I've said, secondly, the interpretation is very convincing again about the reason why Elizabeth did not marry, because she also found no suitable matches in England. For example, it says that not marrying an English noble would stop them quarrelling in court. This is convincing about Elizabeth's decision not to marry, because she could not marry Lord Dudley, or Leicester as he might be known, despite the strong feelings they had for each other, as she had raised him up in court and he would be a leading Protestant. So when he proposed, she would reject him, as other Catholic nobles would be upset and other prominent nobles would fear they would lose their positions in court. Furthermore, it's convincing as Dudley and his family had suspicious backgrounds as well that would undermine Elizabeth. For instance, Dudley's father had been a traitor to Mary, and Dudley's wife had mysteriously died, falling down the stairs. Okay, so we've explained with Norwich why he is not a good candidate and how that causes problems. Now, there is no conclusion to this question. You're just assessing each viewpoint individually with a clear line of argument. If you, however, have not given a clear line of argument, saying very convincing or partly convincing, you will need to add a short conclusion at the end because you have been asked to say how convincing it is. I hope you found that useful as a way of doing the how convincing question, using lots of your knowledge to explain your answers, and had a good revision about Elizabeth's problem of marriage. So if you found it useful, do have a look at my revision guide. You can find a link to it on the Amazon page link in the YouTube video, and also do have a look at my playlists and subscribe so you can do more revision videos to help you with your GCSE exams. Okay, hope to see you again soon. Bye bye for now.